Hello, everyone, and welcome to our advocacy workshop for childcare providers. I am April May, the Coalition and Programs Director for Mississippi Early Learning Alliance, and I would like for my colleagues to introduce themselves. Biz?
Hey everyone. I'm Biz Harris. I'm the interim executive director of MELA, and we are excited to be here.
And I can close out MELA. I'm Chloe Lake, the communications director with MELA. And also, hopefully we'll share some good information with you today. And I'm going to pass it to Dr. Grace.
Hello, I'm Kathy Grace. I'm the co-director of the Graduate Center for the Study of Early Learning at the University of Mississippi, and I'm very happy to partner with these fine ladies to share some information today.
All right, thank you all so much. We will now move over to our agenda. For today's agenda, we're going to cover 4 points, and they are: understand when you can be most influential in the legislative process. The second one, establish what kind of policy change or legislative outcome you want to achieve. The third one is determine who to target. And our fourth one is plan out how to influence them. Now we will hear from Dr. Kathy Grace as she covers part 2, when you can have the greatest influence.
This is a very important group of slides because it really helps us to understand how much power we have. We just need to take advantage of the opportunities that this process is going to afford us. First of all, where does policy come from? There's 2 different tracks. One is the legislation and the appropriation track. The other one is when policy is made based on regulations and the implementation of those regulations. And you will hear me throughout this talk about what is a legislative responsibility, and then what is the responsibility of a state agency, and the 2 sometimes are different. So legislation creates laws, and those laws have to be followed by a state agency. And these create and maintain programs and or processes. Now, the appropriation is the money. You can have what they call an unfunded mandate or unfunded law, which really can't go very far if you don't have the money to put it in place. So the appropriation is when programs are allocated the amount of money that it would take to actually support and conduct whatever the piece of legislation is that's passed. Now, it's important to recognize that in state agencies, that comes through their budget request. So when the budget request is made from, say, the health department, if there's anything in there that they need to be responsible for in early childhood education, support, first steps, it has to be reflected in their budget to have the smoothest way of getting it the funds appropriated. Now, who does this legislation? It's the Congress, the Mississippi legislature for state decisions, and then at the local level, city councils. And we forget sometimes that we have a lot of say-so in the cities as far as what city councils decide that they're going to do with their local budgets to support young children and families. So now that's one side of the coin. The other side is the regulations and implementations. Now, the regulations are the rules and requirements for how program services or laws are carried out and how the funds are distributed. They're also responsible for the implementation. They're making sure that things actually get done, and actually they set up who is going to do it. Now, in our state, we have early childhood education services through several different state agencies. We have the Department of Human Services, which is CCPP, and other things related to quality. We have the Health Department, Mississippi Health Department, which is for the licensing regulations and the responsibility of first steps, early intervention. And then we have the Mississippi Department of Education, which is where the pre-K collaborative programs are housed, and also is where you get your child adult food program resources if you choose to participate. And then we have local governments. So again, you have those entities there who are responsible for setting regulations. Many times in child care situations and dealings, people think that the legislature is the one that makes the rules. Well, the federal government sends funds to Mississippi directly to the Department of Human Services with certain guidance. Says this is what you must do with this money, but it gives the Department of Human Services a lot of latitude on how they can implement what the goal is or what the laws are federally that they are intended to do in our state. The Department of Health has a board, a health department board, and they oversee what the health department does. There's also a mission in each of these agencies that's set by legislation that says the mission of this agency is to do A, B, C, D. So they have, by the legislative mission, set up certain requirements that they are to do. But the main thing we need to remember is that legislators cannot influence, for instance, what the market rate survey is and how much funding you would receive as a child care provider. That is a DHS regulatory or through the Department of Human Services within that agency. So if we keep those separate, then it's easier to have conversations with legislators because we can really speak with them about what in fact they have some latitude or some control over. Next slide, please. Now, examples of child care policies. Here's some legislative changes. This is again would come from the legislature. They could allocate state funding for training and wage supplements if they choose to through a law or through a way of transferring some of our lottery money into the wage and training programs. It's not state funding in the sense of a budget. It is around the fact that the lottery funds are already there, and so that could be a source. Also, the legislature could introduce and pass a bill that gives tax credit to child care providers and to parents. And they could introduce and pass legislation to remove the biggest barrier we've had for years, and that is the barrier for child support being required with the CCPP application. And so now, if that is removed, that would free up thousands of children to be able to access the early care and education programs through CCPP. Now, that could be through legislation. Now, let's look at the regulations or implementation changes. The agency heads, again, the health department and DHS could create an infrastructure for child care workers to get more training for themselves and special needs service students to help with the instruction of the special needs students, as well as those children who are normally developing. And they could, through the health department, move from looking at some licensing regulations that would perhaps support the child care centers better. And then they could also, with the Department of Human Services, move a percentage of TANF funds, could move up to 30% from TANF into the CCPP program so that more eligible families could be served. That would mean more money. Now, those things can be done at the agency level. Now, what does the governor do in all this? He appoints the specific members to the CCAC, which is our state council. He approves the funding that MDHS, the health department, the Department of Human Services could move from TANF to CCPP in the fact that he personally appoints the head of DHS. So if that is something that he and the head agree with, then it can be moved. It doesn't even need legislation if they choose to do so. It makes it better if it's in legislation, but it's not required. And then the governor finally signs bills into law. And so without that governor's signature, it's not going to be a law. Even if the House and the Senate both pass it, it still has to be signed into law. Okay, next slide. Now, this looks a little confusing, but if you'll just follow along with me, I think you'll see the opportunities are very frequent for you to be able to participate in how you feel a part of this process. So how does an idea become a law? All right, you have an idea, you go to your legislator, you help them to understand the importance of whatever your idea is. If they feel like that it is for the good of the population that he represents in that state part of the state, then in the House, it can be introduced through a bill that is what they call co-signed by different legislators, and then it's introduced to the appropriate committee. There are several committees, and they will assign a committee to review it. Now, this is where you can, first time, those little yellow boxes mean that you have an opportunity to contact your legislators and say, we understand that Representative so-and-so is going to file a bill for this and that and the other, and we support that. So then it's made it to the committee. Then the committee looks at it. The people on that committee, let's just say this is the health committee, would look at that piece of legislation. And if they feel like that it is worthy and they have enough support within their constituents, which is you, then they would vote yes to send that on out to the entire House. Now, they have to hear from you. Every time you see one of those yellow boxes, that means they've got to hear from you. That means either a call or text, an email, a personal conversation. You can't just say, well, I called them once. That doesn't work. Because sometimes in committees, people will try to kill it because they don't necessarily agree with what the bill says, and they have to have enough support to get it through the committee. Same way when it goes to the House floor, the House floor, it has to be through the same process of debate and conversation. So you got to call them again. Now, you see, I followed down the left side of this slide. All right. The same thing is going on in the Senate, which is on the right side of this slide. Very same process. But when it gets voted on by the House and it's passed, guess what? It crosses over and it goes through the same process in the Senate. But this time it's the House bill that is now being studied by the Senate. And guess what? Some bill goes through the same process that we just described in the Senate. And as soon as it's passed by the Senate, guess what? It has to cross over to the House, and the people in the House go through the same process. Now, usually there is what's called a conference, which means that there's some little word changes or whatever. If both House and Senate agree that this is good, then they may make a few tweaks in the bill, but it is sent to the governor, who has to sign it before it becomes law. And then he could veto it, which says, I'm not going to pass this. I'm not going to sign this. It's not going to get through me. So if that happens, then there's a long process that gives you an opportunity to try to get your legislators to get enough votes to veto. And that means to override the governor. That is very hard to do. So we want everything to go smooth so that he'll sign that bill. Then he gives it to the agency that's in charge of implementing the law. Now, I know I just talked a whole lot, but the main thing is that you can see yourself in every one of those yellow boxes. That's when you need to call, when you need to push. And you will have people who will be texting you, emailing you on the progress of certain bills so that you can keep up with it. Because these things have deadlines. They have to be to the House committees, to the Senate committees by a certain deadline. They have to be voted out by a certain deadline. So all of these things are very important. And when you hear or see a text that says deadline approaching, that's what that means. It means don't fool around. You got to talk to your folks now.
So I'm going to be talking about part 3, establishing what kind of policy change or legislative outcome you want to achieve. And Dr. Grace has done a great job letting us know sort of when in the process you can have an impact, when you want to be reaching out to your senators, your representatives, and even to some extent your local officials. That also, very importantly, we need to know what we're going to say to them. And this also gets back to some of what we talked about where policy comes from. But when we're really formulating the story that we want to tell our elected representatives and our elected senators, then this is where all of that understanding of the system comes into play. So for this section, we're going to start pretty broad and then move very narrow. And the reason for that is we totally understand that you have a lot of things that you could ask your legislators for. So we want to talk a little bit about something called Forum for the Future. Forum for the Future is an initiative that was started by the Mississippi Early Learning Alliance and many partners in the early childhood sector. The goal of this initiative is really quite straightforward. It's to get everyone on the same team in Mississippi working toward one big goal. And over the past about 2 years, we've been talking to childcare providers, we've been talking to system leaders, we've been talking to early childhood advocates to think about what would really make a difference in Mississippi for families and young children, for children themselves, and for childcare providers. And we came up with this goal, and it's by 2030, Mississippi's childcare system will be state-of-the-art, fueled by robust data, resources, and cross-sector collaboration to meet the needs of all children and all families in Mississippi. So that is big. We know that that's big, and it's going to take a lot of incremental steps to get there. And we know that some of those incremental steps are going to be based in policy. So while we're thinking about, how big our state-of-the-art goal is and how many pressing needs that childcare has just in our day-to-day, I want you to think about that and how that can be overwhelming and extend some of that empathy for our legislators. So this is what's happening on their side of things. Our legislators are getting requests from all industries, all sectors, and typically they're getting them all at once because everyone's trying to get their requests in during legislative session, especially when there's only those several months in the year where things are getting done. So this can be very overwhelming for a legislator, and it can be very noisy because, again, they're hearing from colleges and universities that they urgently need something. They're hearing from small businesses that they have these urgent needs, and it can be really hard for them to prioritize which needs get their attention. And that's really their whole job. Their whole job is to figure out what are the greatest needs and also which needs are going to be the best investment for them. So they have to prioritize what gets their time, what gets their attention, and in many cases, what gets funding. So in order to cut through that noise, there are certain things that you can do when you're meeting with your senators and representatives. So these are kind of just some general guide rails for an effective approach so that you can be memorable. And again, you can cut through that noise and make your issue and your request a priority for them over all the other things that they're hearing. So the first thing to do is to be specific. Often, again, because we have big issues that we're dealing with, if we're not prepared, we can end up speaking to our legislators and saying something that's sort of vague and asking them like, oh, we really want you to invest in this, or we want you to take it out of the early childhood space. Let's say like, oh, we need better healthcare. But that is pretty vague. And when you have a vague request, you get a vague solution. It doesn't really hold our legislators accountable to following the solution. It doesn't give them a lot to really follow up on. We really want to make sure that we're being specific and we're asking them to take specific action so that we can, first of all, track their response and they just have a really clear blueprint forward. Similar to that, we really want to make sure that we're prioritizing our requests. Similar to this last slide where we've got Homer Simpson being really overwhelmed, we need to make priorities easy for them. So we don't want to be sharing every need that we have at once. We want to be thinking about like, okay, what are the big things that we want that could hopefully snowball into other things down the line. So when you're meeting with your legislators, we really want to encourage you to prioritize your requests and then stay on target. So you probably have a lot of demands on your time, demands at your center, or of a lot of pressing needs in childcare, and all of those needs are real. But in your limited time with your legislators, you want to make sure that you're focusing their attention on just a few things that they can act upon. This will be a little bit more clear once we get into examples. But in line with that, it's so important that when you're speaking with your legislators, that you're offering them solutions and not just problems. And we also want to make sure, getting back to what Dr. Grace was talking about, in terms of where policy come from, we want to make sure that it's within their ability to change. So if it's something that needs to change at the Department of Human Services level, they probably can't take action on that. If it's something that can be done even at an individual level, so let's say we should be able to get the word out about this program, or I need, help getting the word out about a childcare payment program. That's probably not a legislative solution. That's something that can be done in other avenues. We want to make sure that we're focusing on solutions that they can act upon. And also really thinking about this, again, if we're going back to that previous slide, where they're getting inundated with these requests from a lot of different people. Again, we have to understand that many of those requests are going to be really urgent, and they are going to be really important and big crises. So it's not necessarily that you have to make the case definitively that you are the biggest crisis in the state or that you are the biggest problem. We do have to make the case that we're the best investment or we're the safest bet, and explain that the problem is important and it's urgent and it needs attention, but also don't worry, we have a solution for you. We have a pathway forward. We can get you that win for your constituents. Another thing, again, sort of get in line with how we get them a win for their constituents, we want to think about who they are. We want to think about what the legislators' priorities are. So have they been talking about creating jobs? Have they been talking about reducing taxes? How can we align our requests with things that they're already on record with supporting? How can we align their requests with their interests? And just as a note, legislators are people. And sometimes they are not the most sensitive people out there. And we want everyone to be prepared that, in these meetings, if they're rude to you or if they appear disinterested, we really want you to take the high road and to stay calm and, again, stick with those facts. So if they say something that's kind of offensive of like, oh, why should I invest in that? Don't get defensive. Just bring it back again to your prioritize requests and stay on target, because that's a way that you're going to show them that you've done your homework and you know what you're asking them to do. And then, of course, when possible, we strongly encourage you to work with other childcare partners to repeat the same message. In one of our trainings here, we mentioned that we have over 1,500 licensed childcare providers, and we have more at-home care providers. And if we all work together, if all of those voices are combined, we can send a super loud message to legislators and have a really big impact and definitely cut through that noise. So let's get into these actual prioritized shared requests. Again, we're going big to get specific. So the Mississippi Early Learning Alliance has worked with Dr. Grace again and other partners over the past couple months in preparation for the hearings with the Senate study group on the needs of women and children. So that was a specific thing, but these are needs that are going to continue that we really want to make sure that we're prioritizing throughout the legislative session. And the first thing that came up when we were talking to, again, childcare providers and other partners is that we have a big need in Mississippi and nationwide to recruit and retain teachers in childcare settings. We know that we have a staff shortage in childcare. We know that it is a huge issue. It's preventing parents from getting the care that they need. It's preventing working parents from remaining in their jobs. And we also know from national research and from what we've seen in Mississippi that a big reason that childcare teachers are leaving the field is that they're just not getting paid enough. They're not getting paid what they need to stay. They're not getting benefits. So we know that increasing teacher pay isn't going to solve the whole problem, but it is going to get us closer to retaining more teachers in these childcare settings. So then we thought, okay, teachers need to get paid more. What role can legislators play in this? How can legislators help? And there is, because we know that childcare providers can't just raise rates on families. Families can't pay more. They're already paying more than they can often afford. And one potential answer is to allocate lottery funds to training and wage supplements for participating childcare staff. So creating a program that would allocate supplements or stipends directly to childcare workers. It wouldn't go to the center and then the workers. It would go directly to the workers, so long as they stay in their jobs and they meet certain qualifications. So before you have a lot of questions about like, well, what are those qualifications and how does this program work and who's going to be in charge? We don't have those answers at present. What we're asking for is to allocate the money so that we can figure that out. So really, we don't want to get too in the weeds with legislators. We want to make sure that they're getting the big picture of, okay, we want you to allocate this money so that we can design a program and that childcare providers can be at the center of this. We can work with workforce development, with other agencies to determine how we can get teachers paid more and help them stay in their jobs and make childcare a more viable field for them to stay in so that parents can get the care that they need. So that's one big request, is allocating those lottery funds to a wage supplement program. Another big need we know in the state, and again nationally, is reducing childcare costs for working parents and families. We know that in Mississippi, parents are paying about 11% on average of their income to childcare, and it's considered affordable when it's only 7%. So we know that childcare is not affordable for the average Mississippi family. And again, that's a big problem. It'll take a lot of big complex solutions, but one way that we can reduce those costs is to increase access to the child care payment program. And then we ask ourselves again, okay, what's the legislative solution there? How can legislators help us in this effort? One way they can help us is to follow CCAC recommendations and introduce and pass legislation to remove the child support requirement from the child care payment program application. So helping people get access to a child care payment program support will help reduce costs of child care for families. So that's another one of our major asks. So we've got these two prioritized shared requests. We're going to talk a little bit more about how you can fold these shared requests into your specific stories. But I do want to bring everyone's attention to our supporting materials about these asks on the Mississippi Early Learning Alliance website, which is the URL is on this slide. We have some additional materials that go into a lot more detail about these policies that we're recommending. We recommend that for the two policy briefs, which are a bit longer, you read those and you maybe pull a data point or two for your story when you meet with a legislator. But we really want to make sure that when you do meet with them, and we'll talk about this, that you're only leaving them the summary one-pager, because we don't want to overwhelm them with paper. But for your just for your background and for understand, and if you want to grab a data point, we have those policy briefs ready to go on our website for your use and reference. And that's sort of these are our overall asks, but there has actually been some updates in in policy related arenas since we created these recommendations. And I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Grace to talk about those.
Thank you, Chloe. One of the things that we are very hopeful came about just in a few weeks ago when the Governor Reeves, addressed some of the concerns that we've already raised in his overall budget proposal to the legislature. And this is in part due to the CCAC, State Early Childhood Advisory Council's request, and that is to eliminate the requirement that parents apply for child support services as a part of the approval process for a child care certificate. And so according to him, that we have the opportunity to support 120,000 vouchers, but only we're serving 21,000 children because of this state regulation that is burdensome. So we are very hopeful that because the governor has brought this up and has put this forward, that we will be able to see some change in this one aspect of what has become a real barrier over the years. So we want to be sure to recognize Governor Reeves for his thoughts and also give him a shout out and a thank you whenever possible. So I'll see the next slide. Also, he has mentioned that he would propose that Mississippi families be able to write off child care supplies on their state tax returns if we have state income tax. He still maintains that we should not have state income tax, but again, he has proposed that Mississippi families be able to write off the child care supplies, not diapers, wipes, and that sort of thing, if we continue to have a state income tax. So he says, as long as we have that income tax, there should be some incentive to help the parents in supporting the responsible raising of their children. This slide actually now is going to show us what you can do as a voter, as a citizen, as a constituent of your particular legislator, House member, or senator. First of all, is you can thank Governor Reeves, send him an email, or give him a shout out when you're talking to your legislators about how he has already brought this to the forefront. and how we are hopeful that this will continue on and make it through the entire session, and we will come out on the end with a certainly brighter day for young children and their families. And then we want to ask them to support the 2 proposals, and they will have a name or a bill number by the time you're going to talk to them when the session opens. Now, if you talk to them before the session opens, all you have to do is just say, look, we want you to please expand the child care opportunities by cutting the red tape. And this whole notion around the child support is red tape that needs to be cut out. Or the child care. We certainly believe in responsible daddies, but we don't think this is tied to child care at all. And then also to look at what the child care tax credit means, and would they be supportive of that? And if they have questions on either one of those, you are their experts. You are their experts, and you vote for them. So ask them to call you, contact you to get your opinion about what's taking place. Now, related requests, these are very, very important. We want to encourage the use of lottery funds to develop and implement a voluntary program that funds education, professional development, training of child care staff, and supplements through their opportunities to get a compensation through a wage or a bonus if they stay in the early childhood fields. Now, as brought up earlier, the details we don't have to worry about with legislators. We just need to make sure that they are approving and support and even discuss the use of lottery funds in a way to help develop this system. And then also we want to make sure local legislators are going to put in their support and vote for the transfer of the 30% of TANF funds from the TANF dollars to DHS for the CCPP program if it comes to legislation. And there's 2 thoughts. If it comes to legislation and it is passed, then that is set in stone. However, some legislators will say, that's not my job. That's Mr. Anderson's job. We can tell him we want that to happen and that we encourage him to, but many of them will say, that's not my role to put that in law, but we surely believe that you're right and that we need to make that transfer happen. All right, next slide.
Now that you know sort of the messages that we're hoping to share with the legislature and how the whole overall process works, now we're going to get down, how do you decide who you're going to talk to? How do you use your voice and your influence to make the most impact? So we can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so the first thing is it's very important to be strategic about who you're going to meet with. I live in Laurel and Jones County, so I could call somebody in Oxford, but they are less likely to listen to me because I cannot vote for them. They are not my legislator. I am not their constituent. The most important thing to do is to call your local legislator, the person or the people that you vote for, and that you have influence over whether they stay in their job or not. So we have found this really great website that is from the Mississippi Parents Campaign. It's very easy to go to. This is the easiest one to find. In fact, I encourage you right now to pause this video and go type this into your web browser, msparentscampaign.org/ms-legislature. So pause this video, type this in, and then go type in you can do it 2 ways. You can look through your zip code, or you can look through your actual address or your school district. And that shows you your actual address will give you the 2 legislators, your senator and your representative that you vote for that represent you. If you put in your school district, it will likely give you all the senators and representatives from your community, which is also fine. Because you live in their community, you serve their children, you work with the parents that also elect him or her. So you can go either way. So again, pause this video right now, go look up your specific senator and representative and write their name, phone number, and email address down. Okay. I'm going to trust that you recorded and you wrote it all down. You paused the video, you went over there to the Mississippi Parents Campaign website, and you wrote down their information. Now that you've done that, we can move on to the next slide, Chloe. It's really important that you actually reach out to them. Now you've heard what we hope that you'll say to them. We want you to talk about the teacher shortage, and the retention problem, and we hope that you'll talk about the need to remove the child support requirement from CCPP. So you're going to call them to request a meeting. I have found that sometimes I will shoot people an email to their government email address and nothing ever happens. But I have found when I call them or text them, or in some cases, Facebook message them, I've gotten a reply right away. Calling is actually always the best way. They always answer, especially if it's one of their constituents. So what you'll do is you'll say, hey, my name is Biz Harris and I am your constituent. And I would really like to find a time for us to get coffee, or for you to come to my child care center, or for us to have lunch, or even for us to just meet up in town. And I have some ideas about childcare and the workforce that I'd love to share with you for the upcoming session. And I'd love to get to know you. So something like that. And they will say, yes, this is my availability. Now, please know that most of them have full-time jobs. So for instance, one of my legislators owns a barbecue restaurant and a fireworks store. The other one is an attorney. So typically they have full-time jobs. So you'll have to work around your schedule and their schedule. And you'll just want to make sure that they, that you can find a time that works for everybody, because you live in their town. And because starting in early January, they're going to be in Jackson every week. We really, 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 really encourage you to call them between now and early January, so that you can meet with them in your hometown, on your home turf, on their turf. That way they see that you are a committed local citizen of their community. You can make local connections. You can, talk about all the people that you know in common. And so we really recommend that you do it between now and early January, the first week of January, if you can. Also, that keeps you from having to drive to Jackson. So we know that you're busy. We know that many of you live very far from Jackson. I live far from Jackson. It is always easier to get somebody on their home turf. And it also, again, like we said, builds that rapport of we're from the same place together. And then, of course, you'll want to make sure, once you've got the date scheduled, once you've got the location scheduled, send them a text or make them a call, shoot them a call. Just make sure that they know, that they remember that they're meeting with you. As we all know, life gets busy, and you just want to remind them that they're coming. We wanted to show you these images. This is from Miss Joanne Wythe, from Journey Kids Early Childhood Learning Center in Saltillo. She was so excited by the recent legislative hearings on maternal child health that she wanted to call her legislator right away and get on his schedule. She had never done this before. But you know what? She pulled out her phone. She sent him a Facebook message, and then followed up with a phone call. And he came the very next Friday to see her classroom, to meet her students, and to hear about the importance of childcare for the workforce, and for helping childcare providers have, the support they need around specifically teacher retention and teacher wages, and also removing the childcare, the child support requirement. So this is somebody who had, before this year, had never called her representative before. And she took a leap. And I have to say, the first time I ever did it, I was afraid. And because I thought, oh, these people are elected officials. They're very important. Everybody knows who they are. And the truth is, the man that I met with was a nurse practitioner. He was wonderful. He was a normal human being. And he had just realized that he had a passion for serving and wanted to make an impact in Mississippi. So they're normal people. And, it can feel scary to absolutely cold call a stranger, but you can do it. And Miss Joanne Wythe is an example of somebody who did. You've got a date you've got a date for when you're going to meet with your legislator or legislators. And now you got to think, okay, what am I going to say? I have found that if I do not prepare in advance, I stumble over my words and I do not make a lot of sense. So this really came from me working out how to tell my story in a way that makes a lot of sense. It also came from a lot of other advocacy websites and organizations that help people tell their story. So this is how you tell your story. The first thing you're going to do is figure out a little bit about your legislator. You want to really think about what is their perspective here. Why should they care about childcare? Are they a grandparent of young children and are they supported by businesses that are struggling to find workers? What is their angle here? Why should they care about it? Because that will really make a difference for them being able to hear you. You also want to think about the key points you want to make. And I'm going to give you a script or like an outline you can use in a second to do this part. But you really want to make sure that your story is not longer than 4 minutes. I get to talking and I can tell you all the stories and all the things, but much like that picture of Homer Simpson with all the things coming at you, at the legislators, you really want to make sure you're targeted, you're focused, and you keep your story that you're going to tell them to about 4 minutes. And then, because they are hearing a lot of things, it can be really helpful to bring a piece of paper that says exactly what you are expecting and asking of them. And the good news is Chloe showed you on our website where you can go get a piece of paper that you can just print off and bring. We have created something for you. So all you have to do is print it off and take it with you. And it's the 1-pager. A couple of tips. On the day of the meeting, you will most likely need to set apart some time. Again, because they have full-time jobs, sometimes they get delayed, or sometimes they might have to come early. So just sort of give yourself a cushion of time to meet with them. And also remember, you want to make sure that you don't miss your opportunity because in case they have to, get an emergency call or something. If, for instance, they're a doctor and have to leave to deliver a baby, for instance, you want to make sure that you plan your meeting to be about 20 minutes. And again, keep your story to about 4 minutes and leave room for questions. And then this is the thing that Dr. Grace shared a minute ago. She mentioned that you are the expert. You are their childcare expert. And that is the truth. So at the end of the meeting, make sure you say, hey, when childcare comes up in the legislative session, when you start talking about what the governor has proposed when it comes to women and children, please give me a call. I would love to be your sounding board and a thought partner for you. And that's because most of our state legislators do not have staff. They are going it alone. They're figuring out what they need to know literally on their own. So you can be a resource to them if you just offer yourself. Make sure they have your phone number and say, please do call me. And if it's okay with you, I'll touch base with you throughout the session too, and just keep our lines of communication open. And they're usually really supportive of that. And the last thing to remember the day of the meeting is to take a picture and post it to your social media and tag them. In our next slide, this is the part I promised you. Okay, you'll probably want to pull out a piece of paper at this point because you are going to create your personal story. This is the meat of what you're going to be talking about when you meet with your senator or your representative. So the first thing is you found out what they care about. But you also want to give them a chance. I always like to start with a question, and I like to say, good morning. This is who I am. Thank you so much for coming. Hey, I'd love to hear a little bit about you. What is the issue that you care the most about? What is the thing that's biggest on your agenda? Then you want to tell a personal story from your work that illustrates what's happening. So think about the 2 issues we said. Again, child support and teacher wages and teacher retention. You're going to tell a personal story that illustrates that problem or one of those problems, and then share the solution that we've talked about. So for instance, the state can allocate funds to support childcare wages and remove the CCP child support barrier, and that would solve the problem that I just told you about. And then you really want to make sure to get them to commit. Will you support legislation that increases childcare wages or expands access? And they'll say, yes, I will. Or they'll say, I don't know, I have to see the legislation. But you really, if you can get them to commit to you right then, that's a great thing to do, because then they've already verbally said, yes, I'll support this. And you can remind them of that commitment the next time, when the legislation actually comes up. Now, this is an outline. So if you haven't written it down on a piece of paper, introduce yourself and ask them about what they care about. State the problem by telling your story, give them the solution, and then ask them to commit to doing that thing that you need them to do. And now we're going to hear from Miss Tamara Smith to tell us an example story. So she's going to kind of model for y'all what you can do when you meet with your legislator. So Tamara, take it away.
Hi, I'm Tamara Smith, and I'm the Child Care Director of Little Samaritan Montessori Center. And I'm actually meeting with my legislator coming up December the 8th. So I'm really excited. And just like Liz and Dr. Kathy said, tell who you are, state the problem, give them a solution, and let them come to your center. I have invited my senator to come tour here at Little Samaritan Montessori Center. I'm really excited about that because I need him to see the important works that we do here at Little Samaritan, but just in childcare, period, right? So I have invited him to come take a tour of the center, and I'm going to talk to him about increasing childcare salary and the retention that we are having a problem with, struggling with finding qualified teachers or just finding teachers to come into the field. So I have wrote it down. I have my problem, and my problem is we need to increase pay for childcare teachers, and we need to have supplements for recruiting teachers. So we need funding for that as well. I'm also going to tell him a story because here at Little Sam, I have 6 classrooms. 5 of my classrooms are open and 1 is closed, but not because I don't have a wait list. I do. We just can't find teachers. So I want him to see it, me to talk him through it, and let him know how important it is that we raise teacher pay. And we have funds to do that. So we have this state lottery. If he's saying, well, how can I be helpful? Well, we have this state lottery that we can allocate funds for this so that we can increase the teacher pay. Because if childcare not available, parents can't go to work. The economy is going to suffer. So we need childcare. And so since we need childcare, we need to pay our teachers more. And so, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, that was wonderful. Tamara, thank you. That's so right. I love how Tamara brought in the rest of the workforce and the rest of the economy, because sometimes people will say, and Tamara and I talked about it this morning, well, what about other businesses? Everybody's struggling to find workers. Why is childcare different? Well, the reason childcare is different, childcare is what we call the backbone of the rest of the workforce. And I loved how she talked about the importance of her work, but then how she connected it to, the rest of the Mississippi economy. So thanks, Tamara. That was really great. But so if somebody says to you, man, I don't think we have any money for that. Mississippi's a poor state. We don't have money to, pay for a retention or a quality bonus or anything for teachers. You can say, there is money there and it is tight, but here are some things you can do. You can use lottery funds. It is a workforce issue, so we could allocate workforce development funds. Also, in terms of making access available, we can transfer 30% of TANF dollars into CCPP. And then also, you want to really remind them about the effect childcare has on the economy as a whole. That it's costing us money because we don't have childcare in the number of teachers in place to get every, for instance, classroom open that we have available. So those are just some things to think about and to be prepared in case they come back and say, oh, that's a great idea. I love that idea. I can't support it because I don't think we have any. So just have those in your back pocket. Chloe, we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, I mentioned the piece of paper that you'll want to leave behind, remember? And so here is the leave behind. It's 1 page. If you need data points, for instance, if you're wondering like, well, what can I say about teachers or money? You can see right here, this is very small, but you can see that childcare workers make less than dishwashers and cashiers, and even public school pre-K teachers. So these two documents, we don't recommend that you give these to the legislators because they're just lots and lots of information. But it can help you pull some data that points that you might want from here. And then this is the one, this 1-page document is the one that you can print off and give to them at your meeting. And again, that is here at our website.
Hello, everyone. Again, thank you all so much for your time. I hope that you have thoroughly enjoyed this session and gained some very useful and informative information. Now I'm going to tell you what's next, Chloe. All right, you do have options. The first thing we want you to do is to reach out to your legislature and set up a meeting. As you have heard throughout this presentation, you will see how easy it is. If you do have some nerves, just go ahead and overcome their fear and reach out to them and set that meeting up. And then once you have it, and come back and tell us how wonderful it was. Second, if you like a little more help in getting your meeting together or a little bit more encouragement, you can email biz@msearlylearning.org to set up a one-on-one practice session. And she will be more than happy to go through the whole process with you during that time. And also, our last thing, we're going to have an Early Childhood Capital Day on January the 18th at 2 p.m. in Jackson. And we would love for you to attend if you can. So those are the 3 options that you have to follow up from our advocacy training that we have provided for you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. All right, our next step that we would like for you to do, and this is going to be a very important step, and you will receive remind updates as soon as anything is happening. So what I need you to do is pull out your cell phones and go to your text messaging as if you're going to text your best friend. So open a new message, and I'm doing it on my phone as I talk to you all so I can give you specific details. Go to a new message where you're going to put your phone number to send a message. Put in the number 81010, or you can use the number 563-265-6842. So where you're going to put the phone number, put 81010, or you can use 563-265-6842. And once you have done that, you're going to go to the box where you're going to send the message, where you're going to type your message to this number. And in that box, you're going to put the @ symbol, and then you're going to put MSLEGIS. So in your box where you're going to send your message, or you're going to write your message, you're going to put @MSLEGIS. So look at it again. You should have a number at the top, and then in your message, it's going to be @MSLEGIS. And then you can hit send. And once you hit send, you're going to get a message that's going to tell you that you're now signed up to receive updates from Remind. It should say you've joined Advocacy, reply to, send a message to E. Harris, and that will let you know that you have done it correctly. And that way you'll receive updates during the session, and any updates that we will have to provide for you as they become available. So thank you all again, and I hope that you are able to sign up for the Remind app, Remind messaging. And if not, you can feel free to contact us, and we will help you through that process as well.